real zechus to be able to address a community that I really feel tremendously blessed to be a part of. I want to share some Torah that really resonates with me, that guides my Hanukkah every year, and I hope you can find meaning in it as well. It's something that I learned originally with one of my Rabbi, Rabbi Foreman. And it starts with a question that always bothered me, and that's, what was so great about the miracle of the oil? Like, what are we celebrating? What are we so excited about? So it could have lasted for one day and it lasted for 8. Is that really so great? Why did that matter? Right? All of the other chagim that happen that celebrate miracles, those were significant miracles. Yitzias Mitzrayim and Revelation of Har Sinai, being protected in the desert over Sukkot, salvation from Haman. I mean, those are big deals. And then oil that could have lasted for 8 days, one day and it lasted for 8. It's nice, but what are we so excited about? What are we celebrating? So to really get to the heart of this, it takes recognizing that this is not the first time this particular miracle occurs. Hanukkah isn't the first time where a flame burns and burns and burns, but its source doesn't get consumed. Where did that first happen? So of course it's when Moshe is walking and sees a burning bush, right? It doesn't happen. Sometimes we think that Hashem calls out to Moshe and then he notices the burning bush, but that's not what happened. Well before Hashem ever calls out to Moshe, Moshe notices this bush, and he really noticed. I mean, he stopped. He's fascinated by it. And then he goes off the path, and he's looking at it for a while, and then it says, Vayar Hashem, ki sar l'ros. Hashem sees that Moshe stopped to look, and that's when Hashem calls out to Moshe. And you wonder, like, why did you need that entire introduction, those details? Just say that Hashem called out to Moshe from a burning bush. But the truth is, those aren't details. Those are the essence of the story. See, unfortunately, out here in California, we're pretty familiar with brush fires. It doesn't take much for a fire to kind of break out in a dry climate. So you can imagine that a bush that was burning in the desert probably wasn't the craziest or most uncommon thing. How long would it take to look at a burning bush and to recognize, to really see that its source wasn't being consumed? I mean, think about on Motzei Shabbos, we're sitting at a Malav Malka, maybe a campfire, I don't know what we do, right? And how long would it take for you to look at that fire and to notice that the logs weren't getting smaller? I mean, it would take a long time. You'd really have to be looking. You'd really have to care. You have to be invested in it. You see, many people may have passed that bush. Who knows? But Moshe stopped and looked. He saw something unique. He really saw, right? He didn't just look. He really looked. With a penetrating glance, he noticed what other people didn't notice. He noticed the supernatural in the natural. And when Hashem saw that, Hashem said, oh, that's my guy. That's the leader. The person who can really see people, really see me, can see the supernatural in the natural. That's my leader. Now we bring it back to Hanukkah. You know, Hanukkah is fascinating because it happened at a very interesting time. It happened after all of Nevuah really finished. After the time of Chag Zechar Melachi, the people, for the first time in history, were living without the constant recognition or ability to see God in everything. Usually they had a Navi they can talk to. They got messages from God all the time. And they were living without that now. And then they win this war against the Greeks, this unbelievable war. The odds were so against them. And you can imagine some people thinking, wow, B'chastei Hashem, and other people thinking, I don't know, is it really Hashem? We haven't seen Hashem in so long. Is God really with us? And then the Kohanim go back to the Beis Hamikdash. They find this oil, they light it, and something that should have lasted just for one day lasts for 8 days. And Hashem says to those Kohanim, so to say, Hashem says, recognize that even in the natural, there's a supernatural. I'm still here. You thought it was only when you had these grand miracles? You thought it was only when there were Nevi'im, when there were prophets who can actually show and bring my word to you? No, I'm always with you. It takes a Moshe, it takes a Jewish people to notice the supernatural and the natural. You really have to look. You can't just notice it and be like, oh, interesting. No, you have to really have a penetrating lens. You have to be curious. You have to look at the world and try to see God, because when you do, you will see God. You will see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that was the miracle of Hanukkah. It wasn't just the miracle of the war. It was recognizing that even after the obviousness of God in our world, God is still just as present as God always was, as Hashem always was. That's the message of Hanukkah. So when we light our candles, sometimes we go through our lives and we wait for those moments of religion. We remember our days in yeshiva, remember our days in seminary, those moments of spirituality when we're sitting at a tish or with our friends and learning in a beis medrash, and we're like, those were the moments when I felt closest to Hashem, an unbelievable Yom Kippur. And you wait for those moments. You say, you know what, when I feel that again, that's when I'll devote myself. When I feel that again, that's when I'll be fully present. When I'll really devote myself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But that's the wrong approach. Hanukkah is supposed to be that wake-up call. That we look at the Hanukkah candles, and when we see the world through those candles, through the flame that burns but its source doesn't get consumed, we remind ourselves to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu in everything, that there's supernatural in all of the natural. but it takes someone who really wants to see it to see it. So the bracha is that we stop waiting around and we stop remembering those great times in which we had these revelatory moments in yeshiva or past or last year or last month. We stop being passive in our Judaism, and instead we actively seek out. We look for that flame, the source that isn't being consumed, and we notice the supernatural and the natural. That's the bracha and the message and the real chizuk of the Hanukkah candles.
Show us the way.